If you are looking for a special statement to put together for a graduation party dessert table, this cap and diploma cake is the perfect balance of festive and elegant, topped with stunning black and gold metallic drips, and also that fabulous tassel to celebrate the class of 2021. So if you want to master the gold drip technique, join the party and be sure to keep on watching. Baking the cake is supposed to be fun, and the part that's not so fun is leveling and trimming the brown domed edges. My trick to avoiding that altogether is to use cake strips so you can achieve flat cake layers every time. And a huge plus is the end result is so much more moist without that crusty brown edge that we could all do without. Right before we start icing the cake, you want to make a batch of your favorite buttercream. Here I have Italian meringue buttercream. It is the best frosting ever and leaves a satin-like finish on the cake, making it even easier to work with. To assemble the cake, I'm placing a small amount of the buttercream onto the center of my cake board so the layers don't slide around, and pressing the first layer directly on top. For the layers, I always use a generous dollop of frosting. That way, when you slice into it, you have the appearance of thick, beautiful layers. All I'm doing is spreading the frosting evenly across the cake with the offset spatula and stacking the next layer over that. Right before you do this process, I recommend that your cake layers are frozen to freeze the crumbs in place. If you notice, I leave a little bit of frosting peeking out of the edges, which is going to help with our crumb coat that I'm going to show you. A crumb coat is just a base layer of frosting that seals in all the crumbs. All you need is small amounts, and the goal is to get the entire cake covered, and it's completely okay if it doesn't look picture perfect. Once I have covered all the sides, I'm crumb coating the top as well and smoothing it out, then bringing in the sides to sharpen up the edges. Now that the crumb coat is all done, I'm popping the cake in the fridge for 15 minutes, and after that you can go ahead and apply the final layer. You can either use your spatula or a piping tip, whichever you prefer, as long as you get your frosting to stick on there. Lately, I like this piping tip number 789 to pipe rings. It's so much faster to cover and smooth out the cake. To give everything a smooth, I'm taking a large offset spatula and wiping the excess frosting off as I turn the turntable. I keep a separate bowl on the side to wipe the spatula clean as I make a sweep around the cake. Next, I inspect for any air pockets and patch it up with more frosting. For that, you can use tools such as a card, bench scraper, or an offset spatula like me, and apply a light pressure. For the final touches, I'm bringing in the edges to sharpen and clean them up. And we have our iced 4-layer cake as the perfect canvas for the chocolate ganache drips that only require 2 ingredients. For the recipe, I'm adding 1 cup each of white chocolate chips and 1/3 of a cup each of heavy cream into 2 separate bowls for 2 colors. I'm giving them a quick stir before we zap them in the microwave for 30-second intervals. This usually takes 2 rounds in the microwave for the mixture to be completely melted. When it has reached a smooth consistency, we're able to mix in our gel food coloring, but before we do that, I like to add a liquid whitener in. This step is completely optional, but it helps the colors to have a more opaque look. One of the bowls is going to be the black. Usually it takes a lot of food coloring to achieve that shade, but this one in particular didn't require much at all, so I will link it in the description box for you along with everything else I used today. To test the drip consistency, I practiced on the side of a bowl before going onto the cake so there's no surprises and no mess ups, and we can plan the design by dividing it up into 8 equal sections like a pizza pie. Make sure that at this point the cake is completely chilled. Get ready to drip, guys. I'm starting from the edge and holding the squeeze for a few seconds with a medium pressure, then moving over to drag the chocolate without lifting the squeeze bottle off of the cake and letting it flow. It will eventually drip down more later on. The cold cake controls the rate of the drips, which is very important. I'm completing the next sections of drips by alternating between the white and black. The squeeze bottle is my favorite method for creating drips because it gives the most control. So for your longer drips, hold the squeeze for a few more seconds, and for shorter drips, squeeze for shorter. The beauty of the drip cake is the more random, the better. After finishing up my drips, I'm lightly outlining and filling in each section of the pie using a small amount of pressure. If you overfill it, the chocolate will migrate down the cake and create double drips over the ones you just did, so beware of the double drips. Before adding the gold to our masterpiece, the chocolate needs to set completely. So while we wait, you probably wouldn't guess that I'm making the base of the graduation cap out of a sheet of Rice Krispie treats. I cut it with a circle cookie cutter and stacked one circle plus half of one on top to give it some height. And I have prepared and chilled some chocolate ganache ahead of time to spread onto the Rice Krispie in order to seal up the cracks. It is a similar consistency to a peanut butter, and I will be sure to provide the recipe in the description box below. This ganache has your typical 2-to-1 ratio of chocolate to cream. After you're finished spreading the ganache, you are all set to roll out your black fondant. I always add in some shortening before I roll it to prevent the fondant from cracking or drying out. And now I'm rolling this to about 1/4 of an inch thickness to cover the Rice Krispie treat. All there is to it is to drape it over with a rolling pin and gently smooth the sides and top. This is just like adding fondant to a cake. Well, this is like a mini cake, and you're going to trim the extra from around the edges with a pizza cutter. Last, I'm giving it a final smooth with my fondant smoother, and you will see the cap all come together in just a second. After I finish working on the Rice Krispie part, I'm rolling another piece of the fondant to about 1/8 of an inch thick, and as a template, you can use any square-shaped, heavy-duty cardboard to cut out the shape, as well as to hold the cap in place. This is the only part of the cake that isn't edible. Once I have that cut, I'm attaching the fondant onto the board with a thin layer of corn syrup and going over it once again with a fondant smoother and some shortening. We can't have a graduation cap without the diploma, and for that, it's super simple. I rolled this white fondant to 1/8 of an inch thick. Keep in mind we are rolling it tightly, so I like to trim off the edges to make the cleanest roll possible and prepare it by slicing into a long strip. There's no right or wrong way to do this, so you can play around with your fondant and see what method you like best. Next, we're going to roll as tightly as possible and cut off the end when the diploma is to your desired look, and crimp the fondant to leave it slightly open for the diploma tie that I'm creating with a thin black strip of fondant by folding it over and sealing shut with a dot of corn syrup. I love how realistic this came out with all the details. Congratulations, class of 2021. Here's your diploma. Finally, to make this cake even more over the top, it is time to paint our drips gold and give them a makeover. This metallic edible paint is so much better than mixing your own with alcohol and luster dust because it is a lot less clumpy and doesn't evaporate as fast. Just make sure to always use a light touch when you go over the drips with a thin brush. And to be safe, I let the drips set overnight before painting because they stay tacky for a while. Even after a few hours, you risk cracking or making marks in the ganache. A little bit of this paint goes a long way. This product is a 10 out of 10 for sure. For all the white sections, I finished by following the curves on all the drips and the top slices. It takes some time, but the end result is definitely worth it. Before we put our cap and diploma on the cake, I'm finishing off the hat by making the small button that goes on top of the tassel by rolling a small circle and pressing it down to round it like a button. And for the gold tassel, this gold shimmer fondant was absolutely gorgeous and goes perfect with the gold drips. My favorite way to make an amazing tassel is to use an extruder. All you need to do is load a small log of fondant in and twist it shut, then wind the handle around until you see the fondant come out. That's pretty cool, right? This attachment came with the extruder to make a skinny rope shape. Now we have our tassel, and I'm cutting that so we can attach it to the top of the hat with a small amount of water. After the tassel is secured, don't forget the tiny little button too. I'm sticking this right on with the water also. The cap is now complete along with all the other decorations, so it is time to add them on along with this pretty gold congrats cake topper. This cake is definitely the star of the show for your party dessert table, but if you would like to serve it with some other festive graduation treats, a bonus idea is to bake some cupcakes and pipe a buttercream swirl using a 1M tip and sprinkle on an edible glitter. Then add some cute graduation themed cupcake toppers. I hope you guys enjoyed learning the gold drip technique. If you did, don't forget to subscribe for new uploads every week. It's Christina here. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.